And welcome to Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balscherry. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of the coaching changes, some team needs, and the East West Shrine Bowl. Just wanted to go ahead and reach out to everyone and just say thank you for downloading, liking, subscribing to this podcast. It keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. And I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Russ Goldman, who is our normal co-host, but can't join us today. So it's just Steve and I. We're doing the duo show today, I should say. Steve, how are we doing today, my man?
I'm doing good. I mean, there's never a dull moment when it comes to the Patriots. We all know that, and there's been a lot of good news so far this spring. I mean,
yep.
We knew they needed to make real big changes on the coaching staff, and so far they're doing quite well, I think, with this offseason. I mean, we won't know for sure until we see the product on the field, but I think everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they hired Bill O'Brien, then Adrian Clem, and O'Brien's protege Will Long. So I think things are trending the right way this year. And I mean, I listened to that. I know we'll get to it much later, but we listened to that Tom Brady podcast with Bill Belichick and, Gronk, Patrick Mahomes, Peyton Manning, a couple other people, including Brady's parents. They stopped in just to say hello. But I thought that was a outstanding podcast, and we'll talk about that. But that was some good stuff.
I agree. Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that. I mean, man, there's a lot to talk about. So we didn't do a show last week. We took a breather. I know Russ was tied up, and honestly, I'm busy too because, full transparency to everyone listening, I'm getting married in 10 days. So I got just up to my eyeballs and vendor meetings and all these little things. I'm also training a rescue dog that I'm hoping to take care of.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I've been busy. But
what kind of a dog is it?
It has like a pit face and like a German Shepherd kind of body in terms of like the coat. She's I'd say blonde, but it has like a dark. You know how like German Shepherds have like that streak along their spine.
Mm-hmm.
She has like a dark. I'll send you a picture. Off air. But she's really cute. About 9-10 months old, we think. But she's with a dog trainer friend of mine right now, and we are working on that. We're actually going to get my marriage license in about an hour, and then doing the dog training after that. So the fun keeps coming. But I do want to say though, I do want to get to the Let's Go podcast. Steve, I think that was a great idea by you. Certainly a lot of things to talk about, but let's start with the coaching staff. Okay. Yep. Because I feel like personally, I know you and I have similar thoughts to the words in your mouth, of course. But I would say a lot of Patriots fans felt like the coaching staff was, if it wasn't the first thing, it was at the top of the list for many people watching this team. I know this Patriots team isn't a Super Bowl contender, at least at this moment. But I think they underperformed this year. And I know you feel similarly. For me, I felt like it looked like they didn't have a lot of direction on this coaching staff for much of the year, which I'm sure many of our listeners agree with. And I like the fact that the team has really made it a point to go out this offseason, not only hire Bill O'Brien, he brings in an assistant who he's familiar with, who he apparently trusts, in Will Long for the tight ends. Adrian Clem comes in from Oregon. Adrian Clem, former Patriot. Yeah, he wasn't I know some media members love to drive this. It has nothing to do with his coaching, but yeah, he wasn't a great player. But he was a pro player, and just
3-time Super Bowl winner.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, Oregon allowed the least amount of sacks in the FBS last year with only 5 in 13 games. But, Yeah, so he sucks as a guard, but apparently he can't coach if you're listening to the local radio stations. Anyway, I'm happy. I'm happy with. We'll the results will be the results, Steve. Ultimately, that will be what we all judge their
That's the
performances
measuring
on,
stick.
of course. But I'm happy that the guys went that the group in front, the Crafts, Belichick, whoever, combination of whoever. I'm happy they went out and they addressed the offensive coaching staff. I feel like it needed to be done, and they have brought in 3 new coaches, and I think that was what they needed to do. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, we saw it. I mean, the offensive staff was the major reason that they underperformed offensively this year, because defensively, I didn't have any problem with the coaching staff on that side of the ball. I thought they did a very, very good job all year long. Yeah, they had some issues in some games, but that's, it's centered around, mobile quarterbacks. It's something the Patriots have had issues with for several years, but it seemed like at least a little bit that they kind of finally figured it out by the end of the season. And God knows they faced a lot of mobile quarterbacks this year. So, maybe that was the turning point for them. But defensively, I did not have any issue with the staff. I like the staff that they have, and I think they all work well together and with the players. Offensively, you could see the holes from day one.
Yep.
We took the avenue. You got to let it play out, and we'll see if they can figure out how to make it work. And they never did. And so a lot of guys,
Steve, last year it just felt like the entire year. I mean, we were saying this from before the season even started.
Training camp.
Literally, media members, people like us, fans, whoever, everyone's in a collective group. Everybody questioned every single thing they did last year from the jump because it made no sense. And the only reason, like I said this on the show during the season, the only reason Bill survived last year is because he's Bill. If that was if that was Nathaniel Hackett, he would have been canned 3/4 in way of the season. There's there's no there's no other thing in my mind that would allow someone to keep their job like that unless you're an established, tenured coach. But they went out and they addressed multiple things, and that at least has to give you at least a little bit of peace of mind, right, Steve? Like, I mean, it has to give you a little bit of like, okay, yeah, maybe this team isn't, up there with the Chiefs and Eagles, hypothetically, but they're better than what they showed last year. And we said that so many times.
Yep. All year long, we said that because they don't have like an offense that's going to put fear in the hearts of everyone in the league. That we're not saying that at all, but they had the players, to be a good offense, not a great offense, but a good offense. And with the defense, if they had a good offense last year, they would have made the playoffs easily. I think they would have won at least 11 football games because that's what let them down, last year. And it's a shame. It's an absolute shame because I thought, they had a shot to make the playoffs legitimately. And you never know. Once you get in, you've seen fluke things happen and stuff happens. So you never count yourself out once you get in the dance. But, we knew changes had to come on offense because they never got that figured out. It was always the same things coming up. There was constant false starts. There was constant delay of the game penalties. Those things should never happen on a consistent basis. Yeah, it's going to happen once in a while. Crowd noise might get to you. You might lose your, intercom system there on occasion. Those things always tend to happen. But consistently, game in, game out, you could see Mac Jones, saying, you got to get it in because we're running out of time. And that happened nearly every week, sometimes more than once. So I think that's all coming down to the coaching. The offense was never crisp. You watched it. They would have drives that everything seemed to work really well. And those were usually, the first drive of the second half, sometimes the second. where okay, we got it figured out, and then they go driving down the field, and then that's the offense we envisioned for this team. But then they'd lapse right back into that, doldrums where nothing seemed to work, and it looked so forced and clunky, as you said many times.
Yep. Well, it's an interesting conversation with this team right now because I feel like they are in a spot where I think coaching in the NFL means more than probably the other major sports. I think it's still an incredibly important part of the process, and I think with them, they seem to lack a little direction right now, and that's what I'm hoping that this new coaching staff kind of finds. They kind of find where this team needs to go. And for me, I'm curious with obviously the personnel, and we'll get to it because we have all off season to dictate the roster, and there's changes to be made. But I know for myself, for you, I know our many listeners, including Chris, who says that coaching was on top of his list. I agree. I mean, that was the main thing. So I'm happy to have some new voices in the room, Steve. I think that's incredibly important. If we go on to kind of our next subject, not that we have to change the page from this totally, we have discussed, team needs in general. I am still kind of leaning on tackle, maybe upgrading at receiver. I think cornerback. There's a couple others I'd throw in there, but I think those are the top three needs in my mind. Like if you could add a good tackle, a good corner, and a good receiver to this roster, I would feel good about that. What do you think on that? And would you, if again, I know the team has other needs. I mean, we could go down the list. But top three, would you sub any position out? And how do you see it?
I think you're right on the money, and you can argue,
Who's
which one
first?
is.
Who's third? Right.
Yeah, but I think you're right on the money. I think tackle is obviously. I think that's number one. I'm sure you agree with that because, if your quarterback is getting hit from your edges, that's not a good thing. And he got hit way too often this year. I mean, yeah, it's going to happen because every team's got athletic edge rushers. But not to the extent it was happening this year. And he consistently had a run for his life, which is not his forte, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's not where he's making his money. Mac Jones isn't making money running from
no, and nobody's going to confuse him with Patrick Mahomes or
Sure.
Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, at all. So, the tackles, they both had their worst year of their career. So we know they need to upgrade there. I think they need a dynamic wide receiver. And, Tyquan Thornton still might fit that bill, but I would like to see him get an experienced guy in rather than draft another rookie. I would rather see him pick up an experienced veteran if they can do that either in a trade or free agency. And corner, I think they still need a bigger boundary corner. The only one they have is Jalen Mills, and he was hurt all the way down the stretch. But they still have him under contract for one more year. I could see him being moved to free safety if they.
I love that you just said that. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
that's okay.
I love that you said that because people forget. I wasn't okay. So maybe people who've listened to the show in the past have heard me talk about this. When that free agency period happened, one of my I had two people that I wasn't happy about the Patriots signing a couple of years ago, and that was Aguilar and Mills. Mills has surprised me. Aguilar has been kind of what I expected. Okay, and I don't mean that as any really disrespect to him, but it's kind of what we envisioned him being here. Mills, people forget, he was a corner that was good early, then got in trouble, but people forget that he was really good for Philadelphia his last year there as a safety. And I don't know if the Patriots are going to do this, Steve, or not. But if you're telling me the Patriots re-sign Peppers and they have Duggar, Phillips, Peppers, a couple of them roaming between strong safety in the box, tight end coverage, whatever, and you're telling me you have someone like Jalen Mills in the background, I would feel good about that. I like his ball skills. I like his awareness. I think both of those things are strong. I think he struggles in coverage. Okay, so he's not a corner, but I think he's a DB that has a good head on his shoulders, and I like his fit here with New England. I do not think people are talking enough about that possibility, Steve. Share your thoughts on that.
Because, I remember when they signed him that a lot of people were kind of trying to read the tea leaves and wondering if
I certainly was. Yeah.
Yeah, if McCourty was going to retire and Mills was that safety valve, yeah, he can play corner, but he can also move back to that free safety role. And then they ended up needing corners, so he was pressed into strictly being a cornerback. But like you said, he's got good size, he's got very good ball skills. I think he would fit seamlessly into that. And that way, if they end up drafting a free safety, there's no rush to push him into the lineup. We all know Bill likes his vets. So maybe they sign, they have Mills for one more year, and maybe they sign him to a year extension or whatever. And then if this rookie starts showing something, then they can move that guy back in there.
And so what I'm thinking, Steve, is like, okay, you take a guy on day 3 who's athletic, and maybe he's not put it all together yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you sit him behind a couple of really, really good, solid veterans. I mean, I'm not saying I know there's not any all pros in that safety group for the Patriots, but I think there's some good players there.
There's some excellent players.
And so it's like, yeah, take an athlete. He's not ready to start. We're not asking him to start year 1. We're asking him to start maybe year 3. It's like get a guy, put him in there. I think that their group is good. If they can, I know that I feel like Jabril Peppers hasn't been talked about enough. I think his play towards the end of the season was extremely underrated, and one of the reasons it was underrated is because the team didn't do that well. They lost a lot of close games. There was the Raiders, there was the Bengals, there was the Vikings game. Pretty much from Thanksgiving on, it was just it was a frustrating end of the year for Patriots fans, and I get that. But what I feel like people aren't realizing is that Peppers came on strong at the end of the year. And the more and more I watch, the more I say, this is a guy I hope they can retain, because I like the group they have back there. Even if Devin McCourty's gone, which is a loss. I'm not discounting the loss, of course, especially from a leadership standpoint. But if you're telling me you can retain that group, keep Peppers, draft a younger guy, day 3 athletic guy who just needs to sit and learn, I feel good about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at the group they have. I think Duggar is a star in the making. And you got to remember, Peppers was coming off a torn ACL. And they say it takes, a while for that guy to be all the way back. And obviously early in the season, he wasn't. But as we all saw, as he was getting more and more toward that 100%, he was getting better and better on the field. And I think at the end of the year, you saw how good he can be, when he's feeling basically, the way he should feel at that point. I think he should be one of the priorities to re-sign. I think him and Jacoby Myers, if they can work the money angle right, I think they should bring both of those guys back. That would be my priority for the free agents. I mean, right off the bat, I think you need to bring those two guys back, one on offense, one on defense. And I like the safety position, even if they did happen to lose McCourty, which would be a big loss.
It would
Excuse me.
Bless you. It would be, and we'll see. Again, we'll see what we can see. So we've talked about some of the coaches. We've talked about some of these team needs. I don't want to kill people with draft talk. I feel like it's a little early for that. I have been doing some research. I'm focusing pretty heavily right now on tackles, receivers, and corners, as Steve and I just talked about. in terms of needs. I do have some favorites. I feel like before uh, probably in the next few weeks we'll start getting into the names.
Yeah,
Steve.
and free agency has a lot to do with that. By the way, thank you, Chris. He said bless you too.
Chris is the best. That's
So
awesome.
I appreciate that from across the pond, Chris. You could hear that sneeze probably from there. But yeah, I think I've been doing the same thing. I mean, I'm looking at tackles, wide receivers, corners, safeties, specifically free safeties, but I'm thinking to myself, we don't know until free agency rolls around how it's really going to go. Because if they pick up like one of the guys you mentioned, the guy from the Chiefs, right tackle, they pick a guy like him.
No, the 49ers, Matt McGlinchey is the guy.
49ers, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but, they pick up a guy like that in free agency. Well, now, they could still pick up a second tackle in free agency. You never know. But
Yep.
now it's not as dire. It's still a need, definite need. But if they pick up a left or a right tackle in free agency, then that kind of eases that. Now you're not double dipping in the draft for a guy. You might double dip later on. Obviously,
So let's
you
say,
get some depth.
Steve, let's play this out. Let's say they do draft. Okay, hang on. Let's say they do take a very high end veteran tackle, and they give him a ton of money. Whatever. Who cares about the contract? It's not the point of the conversation. Well, let me ask you this before I even say that. What is, if you had the right now, you have to pick what position they are drafting at 14. What position are you taking? Forget how the board falls. Forget anything like that.
It's just saying if anybody was available at 14,
doesn't matter.
I would go left tackle.
Okay, so if they throw a bag at a veteran tackle, okay, and they get a good one, is your thought still the same, or what position would you move to next?
If they got a left tackle, because I know that they still have Trent Brown coming back, then I'd have the option of moving him back to the right side where he was more comfortable.
Yep.
And so I'm still going to try to draft a tackle in maybe the second or third round if there's a good one there for a right tackle. And then there's no rush to push this kid into the lineup because Trent Brown is still there. Now, if Trent Brown plays like he did last year, maybe that push will get a little more accelerated. But I think if they moved him back to the right side, I think he'd probably, I'm not going to say he'll be fine, but he'd be better.
Okay, so you would still, but you would overall, you would still feel like, okay, I probably could wait a tackle if they did that. Because basically my point of the matter is the fact that, there's a lot to be decided. There is.
Oh, yeah.
I understand. I mean, I'm as passionate as everyone, and I totally understand where people, if they underperformed at receiver this year, I also can think that and say they don't have enough. I think they have enough if you had a guy like Brady, Mahomes, Josh Allen. I think they have better than what they showed, and I think a very good quarterback could elevate those guys, but I don't think that Max at that point right now, and I think you need to get him a guy. I'm not in favor of DeAndre Hopkins. I want to circle back to that in a hot second. But I do think tackle is the biggest need. Receiver and corner right there. You can debate them, but I think tackle is by far the biggest need on this team.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, I mean, you're looking at wide receivers. Hopkins and Bill O'Brien didn't really get along in Houston, and Hopkins made that clear after he was traded.
Yeah.
So that's probably out at this point. And honestly, as good as he was last year, in the last couple of years, he is on the wrong side of 30. And you're kind of leery about throwing a bunch of money at a guy that might start breaking down,
So Bill O'Brien, the Bill O'Brien stuff, I totally agree with you on. But I also kind of feel like, you know, if it came to it, I think they could coexist. I'm not really worried about that. But I think it's a factor. I'm just not really overly worried about it. But what I agree with you on, especially, is the wrong side of 30. And what people need to remember is Hopkins is terrific. I mean, he is a phenomenal receiver. He's also going to be 31 when the season starts. He's going to cost you a fortune. And I know that, like, him and his agent, like many other NFL players do, they said
want
that
to
it
get
was a
paid.
mistake with the whole steroid thing. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't matter if it was a mistake or not a mistake. If he gets caught again, he's gone for a year.
Mm-hmm.
He could totally F you over, and accidentally, you know, and I look at him as a very good player, would love to have him on my team, but I'm not going to if I'm the Patriots, I'm not overextending myself. I'll give you, I know this sounds like a joke. I'll give you maybe a round 3 pick. Like, I'm not gonna give you a lot. I'm not gonna give you a lot because my expectations are low. And by the way, if this was a Tom Brady led team, if this was a team that I deemed a contender right now, I might consider a heavier compensation. This Patriots team is not a receiver away. I'm saying the same thing I said 3 years ago with Cam Newton. This team isn't quarterback away. This team isn't a receiver away from winning a Super Bowl. This is a roster flip. Okay, yes, DeAndre Hopkins would absolutely help Mac Jones. I don't think anyone would doubt that. If you watch the guy play for 2 seconds, you know he's an absolute baller.
Oh, and he would help all the other wide receivers on the field. Good. They're not great. I'm not saying that, but they have good receivers, and they have 2 good tight ends that they did not use properly.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
So if they were to bring in a quality veteran wide receiver, the guy I would really like, which I don't think they have a snowball chance in heck about getting, is T. Higgins.
Okay, let's talk about